Um, Good morning, good afternoon, all our guests. A huge privilege to welcome you to this very pivotal event. Let me not talk too much, but quickly pass the baton to Barbara from the EBRD, director from the EBRD, who will be our moderator. So Barbara, please take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dora. And I'm really delighted to be here today, not only because the COP clearly is the most important global summit this year, but also because today this event focuses, I think, on a very critical topic, the impact of climate on young people, and the role, very importantly, that young people can and do already play to promote a green transition. But before we go into the panel discussion and hear from the many very interesting speakers that we have lined up today, I'm particularly delighted to welcome Mafalda Duarte, who's the Chief Executive of the Climate Investment Funds, and who will give our keynote speech. Over to you, Mafalda, and welcome.
Thank you, Barbara, very much. And just to manage expectations, I'm not going to deliver a keynote speech. I'm going to make some remarks. I'm here in the middle of COP. It's very intense. Some quite encouraging signals I'm sure we'll be talking about over the course of the coming days and the coming weeks. But today here we are talking about youth. And youth for us is really critical for our work at the Climate Investment Funds. But broadly, we know how young people's engagement in climate change is so critical. And normally, you know, so if we think about these demographics, these data points, 23% of the world's population, which is nearly 1.9 billion people, are aged between 10 and 24. And nearly 90% of this age segment lives in low and middle income countries. This is fantastic. Why? Because, and I often say that the battle of climate change will be won in developing countries. And this is because not only they are going to run on 70% of the world's energy supply, and we know that energy is 3/4 of the global greenhouse gas emissions, but also because they represent 60% of total GDP. So if you combine these things, we have these indicators showing that all of these other, in terms of energy, in terms of GDP, in terms of global population growth, it's in low and middle income countries that this is going to happen. Now you merge this with these demographic data points. This is where most of the young people live. This gives me significant reason for hope. Because I think it's most of the solutions, most of the drive and the energy and the motivation to find the ways forward, to find the solutions, to implement the solutions will come from young people. And this, you know, when we talk about young people, and we have seen over the course of the last few years how much of this activism and voices and advocacy of young people, what they have done to this agenda at the global level, but also at the national level. You know, students in universities around the world campaigning for their schools' endowments to be divested from fossil fuels. Young activism, winning legal victories for climate action. So these are all, you know, just really great examples of what this power and motivation and drive of young people, what it can achieve. But it's not just a matter of voice and activism and advocacy at different levels. You know, you guys are economic agents of change. I'm just coming from another event where we were giving awards to African entrepreneurs that have presented great innovative ideas of solutions to drive development and climate change adaptation in their countries, in their communities. So from all of the perspectives, I just encourage you all to embrace this agenda in whatever form you are passionate about and driven for, and take it forward. And I was telling these young entrepreneurs as well, to whom we were giving these awards, my message to all of you is keep going, never give up, because you will make it. You will succeed. You will succeed at whatever you want to achieve. You will succeed. It's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be a curvy line. All of us face challenges and difficulties, and we learn. Take the adversities and the challenges as opportunities to grow and learn, and believe that there will be people along the way. There always are people that will be there to support you and give you a hand. So in the context, now Dora is thinking, she's not talking about the work that we are ourselves doing when it comes to youth. We want to engage a lot more. We want to make youth even a more central part of what we do, not just in terms of engaging you in our governance of the funds, so that you bring that voice and those experiences as well, but also governance in terms of the implementation of our investments at the country level. So we want to do a lot more. We have already taken some steps. We have engaged youth as speakers and panelists in our transformational change learning program. So through a series of dialogues with youth, civil society leaders in Africa. We also co-financed the second Climate Smart Entrepreneurship Awards by the World Bank Global Youth Climate Network. And again, you know, even today I was part of the event where we've provided awards to African youth, and this is the initiative by the Global Center for Adaptation and African Development Bank. But we've also established a youth internship program, and we had our first youth intern last year from Nigeria, and now we have an intern from Eastern Europe, Dario, which I believe he's here in this event as well, and will be speaking. But today, in today's event, we are also doing something more when it comes to youth engagement in our work. So we are launching a publication that is centered towards a youth engagement strategy in the climate investment funds. And we very much hope that this will help us define and guide our partnership with young people and really promote youth inclusion in our governance and operations, as I was alluding to. This document is now live on our website and identifies focus areas and activities that we can undertake to mainstream and empower youth in their work. So promoting outreach to youth, partnerships with and among young people, youth inclusion in our governance and operations, and youth capacity building for climate action. So these were the 4 areas that were identified, and we very much look forward to delivering them in partnership with you and always enhancing what we are doing. So let me say a big thank you to all of the youth groups and climate leaders who have been part of the 2 rounds of youth consultations, and also to the ones who took part in our youth needs and capacity assessment survey. All of which and all of those inputs have been added to this document that we are launching today, and very happy to be launching today at this event. So I encourage you all to look at it and to keep engaging with us, helping us do more and better, and we will reciprocate and help you as well in the great work that you're doing in your communities and globally. I will have to excuse myself. I have another appointment in 3 minutes at the COP. And as if you've been in COPs, you know you have to walk distances from one place to the next. So I look forward very much to hearing from my team about the outcome of this event. And again, Dora, thank you, and the team that is with you, and Barbara from EBRD. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mafalda, and thank you very much also for setting the scene so very clearly for the event today. I particularly like your analogy about the curvy lines. I think there are very few occasions in life where the line is very straight. We all, in a way, progress along curvy lines, but we need to make sure that we support each other in doing that and keep the momentum going. So as you say, climate change in a way affects us all, but particularly the next generation. Ultimately, I think it's youth engagement in the climate change agenda is about climate justice. And young people all over the world, in a way, are those that are most affected by climate change, but therefore also have a huge stake in climate action. The decisions that are taken today will directly impact on their entire lives going forward, determining their futures from anything: access to food, clean air, water, stable climate, livable weather, healthy oceans, biodiversity, and many other things. And as you also, as Mafalda said, the voices of young people are increasingly loud and very clear. And indeed, this youth climate activism already has had many successes, with over 200 universities across the world already divesting their commitments away from fossil fuels, but also youth activism winning legal victories in climate action, both at the national and international levels, challenging governments to adopt better and greener agendas and pushing them to pass more ambitious climate legislation, for example. So the voices of young people really can and have to play an integral part in mobilizing climate finance and related commitments. But we need to make sure that these voices are heard. And here I think there is a huge potential to do more for climate finance and multilateral development banks to do better and to engage with young people more proactively. Clearly, as we have already heard, climate funds such as the CIF are making huge efforts in this context already. And certainly we at EBRD are also trying to bridge this gap, not only by building the capacity of young people in climate finance, but also by ensuring that young people's needs are reflected in the way that we design our investments and then also deliver them. Let me just give you a couple of examples. At EBRD, we support programs that enable young men and women, particularly to gain market relevant skills, particularly focusing on green skills to progress their career and grow, and particularly in sectors that are up and coming, where we see high growth, but also entrepreneurship opportunities. So these programs cover many sectors, from renewables to clean energy to green infrastructure, tourism, as we will hear later today, green manufacturing, but also agribusiness. And we do this by working with the private sector, basically with our clients, to shape national skill standards and curricula so that they reflect the needs of what is actually required in the labour market, and to work with our companies to establish effective partnerships with vocational schools and universities to offer traineeships and internship opportunities. This ranges from very practical work, work-based learning opportunities, all the way to highly technical university courses in new and green technologies. But we also support banks to lend to young entrepreneurs, those that have great ideas, or to extend finance specifically for women entrepreneurs, to invest in green technologies and access-related advisory services. And we also, finally, very importantly, engage directly with policymakers. For example, in Kazakhstan, this has led to the removal of any type of restrictions that used to exist that prevented women from performing all types of jobs, including jobs in energy and other green emerging sectors. So across all these areas, we partner with other multilateral development organizations and banks, but of course also with donors such as the CIF. But very importantly, also with programs that directly focus on young people, such as the World Bank's Youth to Youth Network or the Global Youth Climate Network, which also hosts the climate entrepreneurship competition for young people. But I think at this point, let's go straight to our panelists and hear their voices directly, learn from their experience and see how that exchange really can shape what we all do going forward. So I'm delighted to introduce our panel. Let me start with Daria Chekalskaya, who's a youth intern at the CIF, but she's also an environmental engineer, a climate change communicator and influencer, and a co-founder of an eco online school in Russia. She teaches climate change sciences to a very wide audience through online courses. She has a podcast, and she represented Russia at the UN COP26 Youth for Climate event in Milan. And now she's an intern at CIF. We also, I'm delighted to welcome Raghav Goel, who's the winner of the World Bank's Climate Smart Entrepreneurship Competition this year. He's also pursuing a major in economics from the University of Delhi and has founded not one, but 2 startups focusing on key environmental issues in northern India, anything from burning stubble on fields all the way to cigarette butts. And I'm sure he will tell us a little bit more about that later. I'm also delighted to welcome Carson Kiburu-Kibet, who's the co-chair of the UN Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. He's a youth leader of the indigenous groups Endorois, and a community organizer who works with indigenous peoples for their rights, for youth empowerment and global governance. So I'm delighted to welcome him here today. We then have Karishma Ansaram, who's a representative of Yango, which is the climate finance constituency of the UNFCCC. He's from Mauritius and coordinates finance and market working group at Yango. She's also a PhD candidate in climate finance and holds an MSc in carbon finance from the University of Edinburgh, and has been a research fellow at the NDC Financing in African countries with the Frankfurt School of Management and Finance. And last but by no means least, we have here Mohammed Al-Qasem, who's the chairman of the board of the Sector Skills Council on Hospitality and Tourism in Jordan, and who has been working with the EBRD in this context for a very long time, focusing particularly on promoting also green skills, youth inclusion, opportunities for young men and women, refugees, people with disabilities in an inclusive tourism sector. So welcome to our panelists. I'm delighted that you could all make it today. Let me start with Daria. Daria, you wear many hats, as we have heard. You know, you're an environmental engineer, a climate communicator, and now also an intern. Can you tell us a little bit about your motivation for working as an intern at the CIF and what your experience has been so far? What messages would you have to others about this type of experience, this internship?
Thank you, Barbara. Hello, everyone. And first and foremost, I'm really grateful for this opportunity. It's a privilege to be here, and it's nice to be acknowledged at this level. I was real grateful for the whole opportunity to be a CIF intern. The main reason why I decided to join CIF was because as a communicator, I felt even obligated to get insights from organizations that are who can influence directly and scale global climate action. To see things from different perspective, because when you are there on the ground doing climate action at the frontier, you don't really operate on such scale as like billions of dollars mobilized for climate action. So I really wanted to learn lessons that I could share with others and with my community, especially, and I know some of them are here today listening to this, so thank you for being here. My biggest takeaway from this internship was hope. I think because I managed to see things from different scale. I was working closely with stakeholder engagement and communication teams in CIF. It proved me that there are passionate, well-equipped and devoted, well, adults, people affecting climate finance. So it really gave me a lot of hope and motivation to not give up and to actually develop further in the field of climate finance. So by joining stakeholder engagement team, I also could contribute to this consultation note that we launched today towards a youth engagement strategy, which I hope will begin a long-term engagement with youth in CIF. And it's really nice. It feels really great that this engagement is coming through within CIF and not pushed from outside. So it's coming from Mafalda herself, and then it's coming from all parts of CIF, and I'm pretty sure it will find the way for all of the programs of CIF. So my message to the youth fellows would be, I gotta be honest, when I applied, I had a really vague understanding of climate finance. So it was challenging for me. However, it was also enriching experience, and I learned a lot. It filled a lot of gaps in my understanding of climate action and climate finance. So it definitely helped me as a climate educator and communicator. So seeing those trends, I know that there would be more and more such opportunities for youth. And I would recommend my fellow youth to challenge themselves. Go to the industries where you feel uncomfortable with, where you have a lot of questions. I think by that, the experience can really enrich you. And also you can really bring different perspective into the work that organization does.
Thank you very much, Dari. I think your last point about bringing in a different sort of point of view into the organization that you join is hugely important. So I think the learning really goes both ways. It's about young people learning, but it's also about the organizations learning from the young people and shaping what they do and how they operate in this context. I think that's a very important point. Thank you. Let me move on to Carson. We know Indigenous communities play a hugely important role in providing stewardship, in conservation, and also sustainable forest management. Can you tell us a bit about your experience working at that nexus on climate action, but also focusing on supporting Indigenous young people in particular?
Thank you so much, Barbara. I hope my voice is okay. Thank you. I see you're nodding. So this is well appreciated by the Indigenous youth. Thank you so much for the invitation from the World Bank and UNICEF. We appreciate this. And so before I get into the question, it's important that this voice is heard, and I am adding my voice as well in person at the COP26 right now as we speak in Glasgow, tuning in and representing the Indigenous peoples, and not just the Indigenous peoples, but the Indigenous youth. So back to the question, as you have said, the Indigenous peoples have that direct link between conservation, the nature, and the entire biodiversity. It is a livelihood for us and then the Indigenous people. So we represent, alongside the Indigenous peoples, major group at the global level, but we also have the international Indigenous peoples mechanisms at the climate change here. And I will say that if we want to contextualize the climate justice or the climate financing, we have to bring in the climate literacy issue, because most of these avenues exist like SAFE, but deep down at the grassroots level, where we have community-based organizations that tackle and they face and tackle these challenges day in, day out, don't have the information at hand. And so I will say that self-determination and comes in for the Indigenous peoples to be able to direct and to have their own livelihoods, of course, with the FPIC and free, prior, and informed consent. But then again, there's always been bottlenecks with the member states, as we see here, who are known as the parties. For me, I would say that let's all embrace the human rights-based approach in the entire discussion. And for all the way from the Amazon people to the Batwa in the Congo Basin, the matter is very crucial. And we're all here to shine a light on those key challenges and to make sure that representation is very valuable. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very much. And I think, again, hugely important points about self-determination and particularly focusing on those who live in a way at the cold face of climate change, where it's already happening in the communities that are battling with the impact already. So thank you very much for raising these points. And we'll come back to that. I will ask you some follow-up question on those things also in a moment. Let's go to Raghav. First of all, huge congratulations on your win at the Climate Smart Entrepreneurship Competition earlier this year. So clearly climate change and in a way this green economy transition also creates opportunities for entrepreneurship, for new ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about your enterprises and what they do? And particularly also what motivated you to go into climate action and how did you go about that?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the opportunity. I'm really glad to be a part of this enlightening panel. Talking about my enterprise, we are a group of students from Delhi University itself. I currently lead the group of students. We are, I would say, like-minded students, and we focus on climate entrepreneurship. We build projects focusing on the key challenges that we see around us happening every day. There are two focus areas. We try to make these projects financially self-sustainable because going ahead financing becomes a huge problem for these projects. So we try so that these projects are revenue generating and can finance themselves going ahead. Number two, we also try to make these projects community centered, that going ahead, the communities can take ownership of these projects. And as we receive our intervention in one project and move on to the second project, the previous project is still running and now the ownership is with the community itself. So with this foundation, we are working on two projects right now. I would like to talk about both of them. One, we are focusing on one of the world's most littered waste. I think many of us would be surprised to hear about it. It's not plastic straws or plastic wrappers. It's actually cigarette butts. Not many people know that cigarette butts are made of plastic as well. They are not just microplastic, but they are toxic microplastic, which makes them even more dangerous. 80% of the cigarette butts that people flick end up in our oceans, and single cigarette butt can pollute as much as 500 liters of ocean and kill the marine life in it. So this was a problem we saw, and we found out that no one was actually talking about it. There wasn't enough discussion around this topic. We took up this project wherein we are now collecting cigarette butts. We are recycling them into, we are extracting the plastic out of it and recycling into other plastic products. The second project is very contextualized to India, I would say. It's around stubble burning. In India, after harvesting is done, before the next harvest season, the stubble, that is the crop residue that is left, is often burnt off. This creates a huge problem for air pollution and things like that. So what we are doing is we are tying up with farmer organizations in northern India. We are buying their agricultural waste for them, which is giving the farmers an extra income stream and giving them the motivation not to burn their crop residue. We are converting this crop residue into energy fuel, which can be later on used by industries. So it's combating two problems at one hand. One is the burning of crop residue, and the other is use of fossil fuel for energy. It's replacing it with a more sustainable option, I would say. Talking about my motivation for entering into this whole green ecosystem, I would say was rather that it was the changes I observed in my surroundings. Particularly that I myself live in northern India, where I see a lot of air pollution during the harvesting seasons. I also thought that if not us, then who would do it? And I think now is the right time to start all these initiatives. So yeah, that was the whole motivation around it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have to say, I find this hugely inspiring, that you see a problem, but not only do you recognize the problem, you then actually get together with at your university, but also with others, I'm sure also investors, in order to find a solution. And from what you tell us about the businesses that you have, these clearly seem to be something that could be scalable and could be then also applied certainly at the global level. So thank you very much. That is really, really interesting and I think hugely inspirational. Let me go to Karishma next, who's to hear a little bit more about the understanding that young people may have or actually may lack in relation to green finance in particular and how it works. Clearly, some of the speakers that we have here are very well versed in this and know how to turn a good idea also into actually a business. So, but this clearly is not something that will be very easy for everybody. So indeed, we have actually seen from the findings of this report that was published by the CIF today that young people feel that they don't generally have a very good understanding and also influence in climate decision making at international fora and institutions. So Karishma, if I can come to you, as a young person who engages exactly in this space, what do you think are the barriers for this low level of, or self-identified low level of low understanding that exists among young people, and what could be done in order to make young people more aware of the opportunities and how they can get engaged?
Thanks, Barbara. So, hi everyone, joining you from COP directly, and with some hot updates as well on the negotiation on climate finance. And we as youth, we have been following the negotiations very closely. Let's talk more about the understanding of climate finance by youth. And at younger level, we have been doing a research project to analyze the needs of climate finance and their access for youth-related projects. And from those initial research that we have been doing, so what we could see is that the youth does not have as your report is saying as well, they don't have a good understanding of climate finance, basically because they don't really know which aspect to relate to climate finance. So how to define it? Usually they define it only as funds coming from GCF and GEF. So they need more awareness. We need to create more awareness about what is climate finance, what will really mean, what type of funds we are speaking, what type of financial flows would go to the to climate finance. So we need to educate them about this. And the second thing is they have a lot of barriers to access climate finance itself. So one of the main barriers is about the bureaucracy of the application for funding. So they say it's too time consuming, and also it takes very long for a turnaround. So the turnaround time is very long for them. And thirdly is they do not have proper governance. So some of the youth-led initiatives, they are not well established. Some are like entrepreneur startups, but they are not like proper businesses that would attract the funds. But some are also like very small NGOs, and they would not be able to manage the funds being received. So this is one of the key barriers that was there, like very small initiatives at small scale, but the funds that are out there would give like, for example, the EU fund and so on, they would give like 800,000 euros and like the minimum. And how would you expect the youth to touch this minimum and come forward with projects that would be eligible for these funds? So seeing like the size of the amount is very important as well. And I would also stress on the information. So when we ask them about where do you get the information about climate finance, or when you need funding, where do you get the information? So they were randomly speaking about networks, social media. So there's no centralized platform about those finance being available, not only targeted for youth, but for NGOs in general. So we need like a centralized database so that this they can easily look for funding. Also, there is a need to harmonize the application process. It cannot be like different MDBs would do different kind of application process, different criterias. The youth, we find it too time consuming to tailor-made the application every time, and it takes a lot of time to prepare the application and also to meet the eligibility. So once there is some harmonization, we as youth, we will know how to position ourselves in terms of reforming the governance internally, in terms of preparing our profile and so on. So for us to have a better guidance, it's very important that the funds providers harmonize application criteria so that we also know, okay, this is the minimum benchmark that we need to make to have to attract funds. So yeah, those are my thoughts about the barriers that they have. And of course, we need more dedicated funds for youth. Not like we can't be in the same basket under the same umbrella. We need like specific funds targeted for youth that would help to fuel our initiatives.
Okay. No, thank you very much. I think, again, that's a very important message, to really focus our efforts, particularly on youth, have dedicated funds, have dedicated support networks, support facilities in a way in place in order to enable young people to take advantage of these opportunities, as some are already doing very impressively, as we're seeing as part of this panel today. I'll come back to you on that to ask you a little bit more, but I understand that Carson will have to leave us fairly soon. So let me come back to you very briefly to just sort of, in a way, loop back on this focus on Indigenous people. And can you tell us a little bit more about the barriers that you see that Indigenous youth in particular face in engaging with the works of MDBs, climate funds, and how those barriers could be addressed? Are we communicating in the right way? Are there things that we can do better to really reach out and make sure that the messages from the young people are heard and are integrated better?
Thank you so much, Barbara. And I'm really sorry that I had to push for this because of the next event, for which is very crucial as well in my representation around here. Yeah, back to your question. The greatest challenge, like I said before, is access to this information as well. There are some barriers like the layers that exist, or even receiving the information well ahead of time. Even planning, it is a very important part of contributing to self-determination, like I said as well before, because if from the start, from the design of a program, all the way to implementation and reporting, if you don't involve the Indigenous youth from the start, it would mean something different, and we would feel like we're not part of it. You get what I mean? It's like being just picked along the way because, well, the list says, do we have Indigenous youth? Do we have people with disabilities? Do we have what? You get the point. So from the design all the way to the end of your programming, bring in the voices of the youth. And for us, we have, as a constituency, just like Karishma said, we have the constituency well run, and we have the leadership, we have focal points. And if you don't engage all that leadership, including their membership, it may look like exclusion. And again, of course, I'm not mentioning names. And so that is a challenge. Another challenge is information in accessing these funds. Most of the youth come from very deep in communities that don't have access, for example, to internet or even this kind of information. And so with these layers that we have, these constituencies that we do have, the focal points and the global leadership, it would be important so that we break it down and send it to our members. For example, this is the first time that I am sure GIYC is participating in SAFE event or even at the World Bank. And I understand that, for example, in this partnership, there is all the way to the country level. And so my understanding is the structures are there, but the engagement is yet to be meaningfully felt. I don't know if I left a piece of that question. I'm getting some pressure to go to the next event that really brought me here to Glasgow. Back to you, Barbara.
Well, thank you very much, Carson. And I think it's as you say, it's about well-targeted engagement at the right time, from the start throughout implementation, and really making an active effort to reach out to communities, to use existing structures, and platforms and networks. I think that's a very important message. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Again, Barbara, sorry, I'm not even cutting you short. I'm giving some high five to the rest of the panel and everyone listening. This week, I think there was some, a good step was made. Some member states made some progress and made some pledges towards these funds. And I'm sure even SIF would knows how this, us this information. And we believe that this was a very good step in going forward with engagement. And please, we look forward to engaging with you positively as again and meaningfully going forward. Thank you so much, Barbara, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and have a good rest of your various events this week and possibly next. Let me now go to Mohammed Al-Quasem. Mohammed is a strong partner, certainly, of the EBRD. Over many years now, we have been working together for the development of the Sector Skills Council in tourism and hospitality in Jordan for a long time. Mohammed is also a very successful businessman in Jordan. And Mohammed, I would like to ask you about the role of the private sector, in this context. So we've heard a lot about the voices of young people seeing entrepreneurship opportunities, but also really wanting to shape the solutions when it comes to a green economy transition. How do you do that? How do you look at green skills, training opportunities, greening the tourism sector, and creating therefore also opportunities for young people in this sector?
Well, hello, Barbara, and thank you so much for inviting me to such an important forum with magnificent people. Actually, I'm very delighted to be here today. Actually, just answering the question, to be honest, talking about the tourism hospitality sector in particular, we are very interested in green transformation, and we are very interested in sustainable operations. Yet we need skilled labor force for that, to serve this purpose, and this obviously especially for newcomers and young people. So when it comes to skills, especially green skills, we need to make sure that those skills are actually they are fired and they are there in the training programs that those young people and newcomers are taking them actually before actually entering the labor market. So the training providers don't know the details of those skills. Those who know these skills and all information and the details is actually the private sector. So the private sector needs to inform the training providers about the green skills, about all skills in general when they have to do that. And we cannot do that on an ad hoc basis. This process has to be institutionalized, actually. Here in Jordan, as you mentioned, I chair the Sector Skills Council for tourism and hospitality. And what we do basically is we develop the national occupational standards for each occupation in the tourism and hospitality sector. And we do identify all skills needed and actually attitudes and competencies needed for each occupation in the field, including the green skills. I'll give you an example also. I'm also a member of Jordan Hotel Association, and we adapted the Green Key standards. The Green Key actually standards, which is a standard for excellence in the field of environmental responsibility and sustainable operation within the tourism industry. I led on this file in the association, and this file also includes competencies for skilled force towards a green and sustainable operation. Now, to be able to inform the training providers about all of those skills, we do that now within our institution, and we make sure that within our occupational standards for each occupation, we do include green skills for the newcomers to the tourism and hospitality sector. In conclusion, let me say that, the private sector has or needs to play a proactive role in informing training providers of skills needed in the industry, including green skills, especially when it comes to young people and it comes to the newcomers. Talking about Jordan, you know, the majority of our population are actually young people. So it is very important to direct them towards green skills and, you know, to have a green tourism industry here in Jordan. I hope I answer your question.
Thank you very much. I think that's very interesting to hear the side from, you know, one of the key business or one of the key sectors in Jordan, a key growth sector, a sector that is also greening, I think, very fast and really creating a lot of opportunities for young people, and the efforts there to make sure that young people can take advantage of these opportunities, again, to create a win-win situation. I think that's a very important example here. You also mentioned, in a way, reaching out to young people and engaging young people. And that leads me back to Daria about how best to communicate. You know, you mentioned at the start, young people are interested. There are different ways, though, that messages need to be sent in order to be received. And it's that communication, I think, that's very important. What do you think could be done better in this context? What we should do more of, maybe less of, or just simply differently in order to bridge that communication gap that may exist with MDBs, but also, I think, very much with employers, with the private sector and young people?
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah. Right. So there is this point about being transparent, accessible, and inclusive, which all climate funds and all MDBs love. However, if you really want to be inclusive and accessible, the communication should be aligned. So you cannot be transparent if the language that you are using isn't accessible to the stakeholders that you are trying to be transparent with. And since the youth is a major stakeholder, it will be beneficial to, you know, adapt the language to the audience. I think people in this organization should remember that they are not talking to other MDBs using abbreviations, which probably some of the audience don't really understand. So people don't need to assume that other people know things. It's always okay, and it's always really nice to break things down so that the concepts and the language is the same between people when they're discussing the issue. And because it's really important, because once we as youth understand what is going on, we understand the value that you're bringing, we will go and amplify it. We will go and circulate it in our youth networks. You know how active we are, and we can really bring forward all of the action. We can scale it up in our own way, but we need to first understand it. And it goes from communication, and it goes from organization. It's really important to engage with education opportunities, because you guys need to open up how you work. We will be working there in a couple of years, and we need to understand the system that we are inheriting in. We need to be equipped and we need to be adapted. I think that's my main message. And before I go, I think I really want to draw attention of CIF colleagues, CIF team, that the node that we launched, it was developed within CIF by youth members, and we attracted incredible amount of youth leaders throughout the globe. We mobilized them and we created this node, and now we want our voices to be heard.
Thank you very much, Daria. I think it's very, very important, as you say, about how to communicate, voices being heard, relying on a huge degree of existing organization amongst young people, but communicating in a way that works for everybody, for both sides. Raghav, let me come back to you. In a way, we're now talking a little bit more about some of the challenges that we encounter across different areas. We've heard your very inspiring examples of entrepreneurship and the initiatives that you have taken, and that I think others have taken as well with you. What are the challenges, though, that you encountered, and how did you overcome those, and how could, in a way, working with MDBs or CIF and other donor funds, and also other stakeholders in this broader system, how could those stakeholders make things better for entrepreneurs such as yourself?
Thanks for the question, Barbara. I think entrepreneurship is a very roller coaster like ride. We come across different set of challenges every day, and we need to resolve them in real time. But if you had to ask me, one overarching challenge that we face is rather not a very tangible challenge, but an intangible challenge that we face in the form of, I would say, demotivation, or a question to ourselves that most of the problems that we are trying to solve can actually be solved at, say, a policy level change, a government level change, or by big industrialists. We as a group of young kids, probably in our 90s or 20s, can do our bit definitely. But does that really help at a global level, or does that really help solve, say, at least 50 or 60% of the problem? So this is a question that we ask ourselves every day. But then it really helps going ahead when organizations like the World Bank, GYC, and etc. support us with our entrepreneurship endeavors. It really helps us give that, I would say, the credibility for us to scale up our infrastructure, both in terms of both monetary infrastructure as well as people, skills, etc. So that's one, I would say, the spark of demotivation that comes now and then. Other than that, I think finance becomes another big hurdle going ahead, because everything that we do requires a lot of money, especially in terms of capital, in capital expenditure, in terms of buying out machineries, setting up those recycling plants, etc. So because we are all young students, we are all dependents, and we do not have income streams of individual as of now. We have to go to crowdfunding sources, CSR sources, etc., which involves a lot of, which consumes a lot of time and which are not reliable at times. And I think overall, if I have to talk about one challenge that I see personally in the climate entrepreneurship landscape, I would say that there's a large gap in terms of sensitization. Going ahead, I see the whole talk of climate sustainability and responsibility. A lot of people are taking it as something that is good to have, or as an accessory. A lot of organizations, individuals, etc. I'm seeing this. For example, when you asked me what was my motivation to enter into a climate landscape, I was not able to answer that very well, because I think that this is something that, instead of you having an external motivation, this should be something foundational and should come from within. I think instead of this being something good to have or as an accessory by a lot of organizations and individuals going ahead, this should be built within the system as a foundation, instead of being as a tool to advertise or stuff like that. So this is one, I think, sensitization hindrance that I see going ahead should be overcome, that this should come more from within, and each individual should realize their own responsibility for reducing their footprint, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, again, very important point here about it's not a good to have, it's not an add-on. This is how we do business. This really needs to be integral to how we plan everything that we do. And in a way, the question shouldn't even be asked, why do you go into climate finance? The question would more be, what do you do as part of your career in order to support the climate? Because it should be part of everybody's job, regardless of where they are, in whichever sector they are. Very important point and very well made, Raghav. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Maybe, Karishma, if I come back to you. So we've heard a lot about the very active voices from young people across different areas as part of this conversation, very pertinent points being made. But of course, there are also mechanisms such as Youngo, for example, to integrate young people into national, global negotiations, NDCs and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit more about how this works and what the opportunities, but maybe also the challenges are in this context?
Okay, so at Youngo level, as you all know, we have a finance and market working group, and for the past 2 months, I would say, we have been working on a global youth statement. So on the global youth statement, we asked organizations to collect some input on different thematic areas related to climate change, and one of them was finance, of course. So we collected input from different institutions, but also as individuals was also given the opportunity to provide their insights. So from there on, we got like insights, more than 1,000 input from youth, which we then took, we categorized them into different teams and send it back to the working group. So the finance working group had the task to streamline and also dig in depth into each propositions being made and align it to the Paris Agreement, of course, to the agenda items that would be debated during COP and provide our recommendations. So we had this task and we got everyone on board from the working group to help us with this. So I would say it was quite an intense piece of work that we did during the last two months. Every week we had to meet. So this is one. And the second one is we have a seat at the Standing Committee of Finance, which is curated by the UNFCCC. So as an observer organization, we provided our insight and recommendations and comments on the biannual assessment report that was circulated. And this was launched during COP. So we had our input in there as well. So at younger level, we draft policy papers and statements whenever we have the opportunity to do so. And we also ask working group members to collaborate and to reach out to their national organizations and national governments to see how they can get involved into decision making. Sorry, I'm having a background. And policy making in the country. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Karishma. And I think we all have I have a slightly croaky voice today as well. So I'm just aware of time. Maybe Mohammed, if I can come back to you very quickly, and in the length of a tweet, maybe, you know, listening to all this as an entrepreneur and as a leader of a key sector in a country, where do you see the key takeaways from that? How could we, in a way, reduce the smoke around the green jobs and skills agenda for young people?
Sorry, it's cut off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Barbara. Can you repeat this again?
Sorry, I was saying that just maybe in a length of a tweet, if you could give us your key takeaway as you know, a representative of an important sector in a country such as Jordan that offers huge opportunities in relation to green skills and jobs. What is the key message that you take away and that you would want others to take away from this event today?
You know, to be honest, I just heard like many magnificent initiatives by those young people, like, you know, and many countries toward, you know, all of the green transformation. And I believe that, you know, that the key message that I'm taking, that the private sector has to take its role actually in engaging with those, you know, with these initiatives, supporting them, financing them, promoting them, you know, being able to promote those young leaders actually, and let's say building up their initiatives and completing them. And there are so many programs that, you know, the private sector should take its responsibility actually to promote them. And there are many ways to do that actually through the private sector. So what I believe is, especially talking about Jordan here, I just want to mention that Jordan is one of the poorest countries when it comes to water. So it's very important actually to look at these initiatives and actually try to learn from them, promote them, bring all young people together, like, you know, through all the world, you know, with such important forums actually to exchange ideas, exchange initiatives, and to build on this framework actually to learn from each other and to transform, you know, all of that information and experience actually towards more and greener skills, greener young people, and greener future for all of us in all of sectors, not only in the tourism and hospitality sector. So I just believe that this is the most important message that I would take today, that, you know, we have as a private sector to take more responsibilities towards what those young people and young actually frameworks are taking. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. And thank you to all our speakers. I think it's been a hugely enriching and inspiring discussion. I certainly have learned a lot and have really been in awe of some of the activities and the inspirational sort of activism and activities that we have heard about today. So thank you again very much. With that, let me hand back to Dora. Thank you.
Barbara, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. On my personal behalf, as the head for the Climate Investment Fund Stakeholder Engagement Program, and on behalf of the bigger climate investment funds with our CEO speaking this morning, I would like to immensely thank you, Barbara, and thank all our noble guests for such an important session that we've all been able to witness. This is, for me, a very important joint achievement between the EBRD and the Climate Investment Funds. It's a clear demonstration of partnerships between MDBs and climate funds in our effort to jointly empower youth in climate action. It's very, very rewarding, if you ask me, but this initiative has taken place, and for the SIF to also, from in-house, demonstrate our passion for taking youth engagement to the next level. And the timing could not have been more right. We have had such very, very deep, well thought through examples, experiences from our speakers, our noble speakers. I'm very encouraged by what Daria said, that being an intern and from what she's seeing, the intricacies and the difficulties of being an intern all gives her hope. It shows her the way forward. I've also read in a comment from the participant, I saw Boris write that he still sees a bit of smoke around issues of green jobs and green skills. This is to say that we do not want this conversation to be the last of. We want this to be a continued partnership and a continued dialogue, especially now that we are ready to put our feet to the fire as we take into account the recommendations outlined in the report, the consultations report that you have all in diverse ways contributed to. As Mafalda has said, and Barbara has elaborated on very strongly, and as I also picked from the opening of the climate, the COP26, Prime Minister for Italy said, and I just want to use as closing, that youth are the center when it comes to our fight against climate action. And he said we must involve them, we must listen to them, and we must learn from them. For the climate investment funds, and I believe for the EBRD, taking the recommendations we've received forward cannot be done just by us as an organization, but we will need that continued partnership, and we duly count on you to help us make this feasible. So let me not stretch it any further, but this has been very heartwarming. We're really hoping that this, as I said, conversation continues. Please, we're counting on you, and I believe that you will also count on us. So Barbara, in your capacity as a director for inclusion, let me quote it right, because I was quite humbled when I saw your title, the Director for Gender Economic Inclusion within the Department of Country and Sector Economics at the EBRD. You have genuinely, from the conversation and from the way you've moderated this session, that it's not lip say when it comes to youth action. It's actually involving them, bringing in jobs, reliable jobs that can help them improve their livelihoods and make meaningful impact in their respective environments. So let me thank you again. Let me thank all the team from EBRD. Let me also thank my team in the SIF, Diksha, John, Ale, Daria, Renata, Andres. This has been very rewarding. And we also thank our colleagues from EBRD, Olga, Lucia, Amal. We want to keep this communication open. I believe that Diksha also mentioned she was going to put a survey in the chat window. Please make time, if you are able to contribute to the survey. This has been very rewarding, and thank you very much. Please let us keep ourselves in the loop in whatever various interventions we are doing worldwide. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.